If everything is just about, the bottom line and driving to that and not creating any connectivity, no community, no authenticity of your brand just because, you're valuing the conversion more than anything else. I think that's a shame. It doesn't need to be that way.
Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. Here we go. We have started this adventure. And you know what? How do I feel today? I feel, first of all, I feel comfortable, but I feel excited. And I got to say, I'm a little intrigued today, but I feel ready. Why? Our guest, we're going to talk design, look and feel, the aesthetics, the purpose, being intentional about how things look and it's just, we're going to interrupt those dark patterns that we have created on the web. And we're going to talk more about this. I hope I've intrigued you, or at least made you impatient to learn who the guest is today. The marketing leader and thought leader, a visionary, thinker, a designer, an educator, a speaker, and last but and totally the most, a podcast host. I recently had a chance to be on his podcast, and it was absolutely an adventure. He is often a professor at NASCAD University, sharing his expertise in experience, user experience, accessibility, web design, and he is a sought-after speaker. If you paid the $2 million and bribe money to HubSpot to go to their inbound conference, you may have seen him speak. In fact, while he's not doing all these things, he actually has 6 bikes. He owns 6 bikes and is usually 5,000 kilometers a year riding. Co-host of the Kula Ring podcast, principal at Kula Partners, Jeff White. Welcome to the show.
Man, Casey, that was a heck of an intro. I appreciate that very much.
Well, I appreciate you. And man, you got to stop doing things, because that intro, you come back in a year, I'm going to lose myself on it. There's a lot of things going on. You're a busy guy.
I am, for sure.
Well, let me pass you this thing. It's heavy, but I know Nova Scotia stock is hardy folk, so let me pass it. It is heavy indeed. Okay. Go ahead, take Thor's hammer. You got it?
Yeah, I got her.
All right. Go ahead and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Well, I think that if you are needing to employ dark patterns in your digital presence in order to create leads and connect to people by interrupting them in inappropriate ways and things like that, that you are doing yourself a disservice, and it's not worth it.
Damn. All right. Dark patterns. I feel the name of a podcast episode coming on. We're going to die. What the hell is a dark pattern?
Well, I think the easiest, probably most recognizable one that most of your guests and pretty much anybody who lives on the web would be familiar with is making it difficult to close or cancel something that you didn't ask for. So, I'm thinking of chatbots in the corner of a website. I'm thinking of newsletter popovers where maybe, maybe the close box is very similar in color to the background, so it's very hard to see, right? Or maybe you intentionally delay it appearing in order to make people think they have no choice but to fill out the form and subscribe to your newsletter.
Man, that is some evil shit right there.
It is, and you see this every day. I know I do.
Yeah.
And one I experienced the other day, not on the web, but in practice. I was on hold for some kind of technical support. I don't even remember what. And every couple of minutes, it would come on and say, if you wish to keep holding, press 1. And if you didn't, they would kick you.
No way. They kicked you?
End up paying attention, like waiting to hit the number in order to stay in the queue that shouldn't be 45 minutes as it is. And, one time you're getting a glass of water and you get booed and you got to start all over again.
Dude, that is nefarious.
It's nefarious. And what do you think it's doing to your brand?
All
Like,
right.
what do you think my takeaway from that is going to be?
Like absolute rage.
Yeah, it's like, ugh, I'm using
What
this.
what brand was that, Jeff?
I can't even remember. I've been on a couple of tech support calls recently, one for a lawnmower. That was a really long one, but they were actually quite helpful, and there was no kind of weird dark patterns other than not enough employees. But,
Right.
I can't remember what the other one was. It was a software product we were having trouble with.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
They're probably out of business at this point
Well,
because no one pressed 1.
yeah, exactly. Everybody's just booting
Damn.
around. There's nobody actually working there.
So what's going on? Are they just focused on the wrong metric? Why are people doing this crazy black hat stuff?
I think, you know, in some cases, people just don't know. Um, maybe you're not thinking about what impression hiding that close button or that cancel button leaves, and you just think that, that, well, we got a 1.2% lift in conversions, and therefore
Uh,
this was the right thing to do.
right.
So you're looking at that and you're being pushed by your management, by your C-suite, by your sales team to ensure that you're driving these leads, and anything that you can do to increase that conversion rate can be seen as good by some. But I I really feel that, you know, that geez, we've been talking ever since the dawn of social media and blogging and all of this about, being authentic, and I roll my eyes when I say that. But, you know, in reality, if everything is just about, the bottom line and driving to that and not creating any connectivity, no community, no authenticity of your brand just because, you're valuing the conversion more than anything else. I think that's a shame. It doesn't need to be that way. And the other part of it too is I think there is some not willful, but genuine ignorance about,
Mm.
the level of the number of people that are actually using the web in a business context frequently that are in some way, shape, or form disabled. And it doesn't have to be blind or deaf
Yeah.
or the more I say visible, but the more obvious kind of disabilities. But I mean, geez, you could even take severe anxiety these days as something that people have to deal with, and how you present the information matters. Um, I can't remember the figure, but when I last spoke on this a couple of years ago, it was like 13%. I mean, do you really want to alienate 13% of your audience simply by not following the YCAG accessibility guidelines when you
Mm.
website?
Right.
I mean, this stuff is simple too. It's like, is there enough contrast between the foreground and the background? Can you see the text? Is it readable? Is it legible?
What do you call this? I don't know if I've heard of this before. The Y?
YCAG is WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is kind of like the standard that we all work within as web designers and developers and marketers to create an internet that is accessible to all with any device. And there's different levels of this. There's double A, there's triple A. But at a minimum, every site that leaves our shop is at double A level. And that means that it can be read by screen readers. It can be operated without looking using your keyboard. It can it can be read to you entirely. There's no contrast issues. This is a fun example, kind of a fun example. I was on a trip recently, with some of our team, and I learned that my one of my VPs is actually colorblind. But how it came to life, how it because we've been working with him for like a decade, and
Right?
he's like, I just went into the washroom at this airport, and I couldn't tell if the stall was in use or out of use, because the only difference between one or the other was whether or not the little thing in the window next to the lock was red or green. That's the most common color aberration and color blindness, is to not be able to see red or green, or
Oh,
to be
no.
able to differentiate between them. So we had no idea which stall was actually available. And I mean, this is a really simple thing in a lot of cases when you're a designer, especially if you're trying to operate within an organization's brand guidelines or whatever. You might be, um, say you're trying to keep things really simple, so you wanna show that this is the page that you're on. You're highlighting a state to say, here's where you are right now." If you're only using color to differentiate and not size or shape or other things, then there's a good chance that there's a significant portion of the population has no idea what's actually going on. And you're not being willfully ignorant, or you're certainly not thinking about, I really wanna screw those colorblind guys." You know, it's more like, "Oh, didn't even think of that." Like, how and if you're not working with an agency that kind of understands those principles and operates within them and kind of starts from a place of accessibility and work backwards from there and add in, you want to add all the cool stuff. I've been a web designer for like 25 plus years, like 28 years actually, which is a long time in this game because it hasn't even been around that long. But you know, when you're thinking about how you're going to approach something, if you're starting with the most basic accessibility guidelines possible so that anyone who arrives at your site is able to access the content they need, they can reach out to somebody for help, they can sign up to be a lead because they're really impressed and want to learn more about your business. And then you can layer on top of that progressive enhancements that those who don't have to deal with those disabilities, you know, are able to experience or appreciate and kind of add to the brand, but they don't detract from it for those who
Yeah.
can't experience it. So it's just an interesting way of thinking about it, and I don't know that everybody really considers it that way.
It's a good point that I mean, there are just people who are idiots or jerks, but sometimes we're just not aware,
Yeah,
you know? And it takes listen to a great podcast like this one
yeah,
or having a
exactly.
coworker who just can't see the thing.
Yeah, and you just don't know until you experience it. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of tools that you can use to test these things.
Yeah.
Of course, most of them are free. YCAG, totally, the public entity.
What's a good one?
Uh, there's a contrast checker app that I keep in my browser. Um, Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, it's just called contrast checker,
Okay.
and yeah, the YCRAG color contrast checker. And basically, you click that, and it'll tell you, all right, what elements on this page don't work for people at this level, at this level, at this level. And it's a Chrome extension. You just throw it in there. There's other ones for like testing whether or not keyboard control. And I mean, a lot of this you can test yourself. You don't even need any special software. It's built in. Like a lot of Apple's products have all of this functionality for enabling people to be able to take advantage of the modern web. And it's all built in and it's really thoughtful. And most of us don't even know that it's there. But as simple as magnify tools and other things like that, they're all built in. So it's being thought about at that level. And I think most organizations these days are when people come to us, they're often, one of the requirements in their for their new website or whatever is that it is like, built accessibly, that it works on mobile devices, that it works on tablets, that it works on whatever they're looking to use. It's pretty common now that they're asking for this. There were a series of, I don't want to say frivolous lawsuits in the US over the last number of years where organizations were actually taking um, website owners to court over their inaccessible site, and it
Yeah.
violates Section 508 in the US or the Ontario Accessibility Act here in Canada, or what have you. If I recall correctly, Beyonce was sued over an inaccessible e-commerce swag store. So,
Wow.
it's there.
And I think those stories, can help remind the rest of us to check it out,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and I think it's just one of those things that I don't know. It's always really gotten me fired up. So I like making sure that these things work. There was a time there when my oldest daughter had a number of ear surgeries when she was little, and it looked like they were basically telling us she was going to be deaf. And so, when you're hearing these kinds of things and it's that close to home, thankfully it didn't turn out to be true. It's just her mother and I that she wasn't listening to. But, like, you begin to reevaluate the priorities of how accessible things are, and, you wouldn't open a clothing store without accessible walkway or a ramp or a restaurant that doesn't have a washroom that can be accessed. Those are rules that are hard and fast, and anybody who's building a business like that knows. These ones seem, because they're on the web, they seem like they're not as well known, but getting better for sure.
Where do you like to learn from? Books, podcasts? What are your input sources?
Yeah, I do a lot of reading. I still follow a lot of the thing you have to understand a little bit, and is hard to know, especially if you're just getting into marketing in the last decade or so, is that a lot of this stuff, this accessibility, the way sites are displayed in different browsers, Safari versus Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, whatever, we had to fight 25 years ago for that to be implemented properly. There was a whole group of designers and developers who worked with the browser makers back then, Netscape and Microsoft largely. This is before Chrome was even a thing, and even before Safari, really, um, to ensure that when we coded sites, they looked the same everywhere, and that we were marking up the content in the websites we were building with things that actually added semantic meaning to somebody who was browsing it with no sight. So they could go through and find out this is a heading and this is a subheading and this is a link
Yeah.
and that you're in a bulleted list now, and so on and so forth. Like, it would actually tell you those things as you navigate through it with the tab key. And we had to fight the browser makers and get them on side 25 years ago, and begin to build our sites in a different way in order to make them accessible. So that now we all think of, well, of course, I'm going to design my website to be responsive, and it's going to, work fine on a mobile device, and it'll look good on a tablet. And if I have to expand it on a great big screen, it's going to look great. That all kind of just seems obvious to anyone who's
Right.
kind of coming into it. But no, there was a time when you really had to, like, it was way more difficult to code a website because every browser required custom kludges and fixes, and, all this extra testing we had to do in order to ensure that things were actually rendering the same, in Microsoft,
I remember those days. There's a little tab on front page to tell you.
oh my god, front page. I remember people, and it's just like, "Oh my god," and you spend hours fixing this stuff just to try and get it to work, and then, in some ways, we kind of relaxed that pixel precision in favor of flexibility to allow sites to kind of expand and contract to the environment that they're in, and enable the content to come forward so that it was fully consumable by anyone. Those are relatively recent wins.
Mhm. It's funny as much as things stay the same, they are changing, right? Just even mentioning front page and how we used to do things in the old days, like, it continues to evolve.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't build sites myself anymore. I have a wonderful team who are far better at it than I ever was, from a design and development perspective. But that core idea of, the user and all users and the accessible, interoperable web are at the foundation of every kind of site that we build and have the opportunity to kind of work on. And I think that culture is permeated Kula, and we just happen to have people who are far greater developers than I certainly ever was. But yeah, cool.
Where do you see this going? What's exciting you about the future?
Man, I think it's ridiculous to talk about AI anymore,
Right.
but there are things that are possible now that, I think in a lot of ways, while we've made the web more accessible to end users, we're in the process of making the creation of it more accessible to anyone as well. And as much as I applaud and respect and desire the craft of building for the web. I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a time when knowing how to actually handwrite a style sheet is not going to be necessary. Um, when you can have your AI actually fact check its own code and do things like that. Now, we're a long way from not having to have any technical ability to do something very complex. Integration of any com platform with the manufacturer's ERP system and tying all of that to something like HubSpot or Salesforce and making that whole thing work. And then all the people parts that have to come into that, that is not the realm of AI yet. But we're not far from people being able to stand up a reasonably successful small site that has, you know, a number of different opportunities to create conversions and do all the kind of standard things that everybody so small business can kind of do this. And I think that's exciting. It's a bit scary as someone who sells those kinds of services in some
Right.
ways, but I'm also confident that we're well ahead of most.
Yeah.
So, thinking about things in different ways, but I've seen some really interesting stuff in the last few months in terms of like being able to I have a friend who is developing custom software that's a Chrome plugin for it's like an AI powered engagement um, pre-engine. So sort of helps you find things to engage with online and
Huh.
within LinkedIn primarily, and then builds your personality into it and enables you to kind of create comments and posts and things like that with greater speed if that's kind of how you're building your personal brand. So built that whole application with AI and then built the marketing site for it to sell it as a monthly service with AI. And I think it just there's a bit of a there was a wild west there in the early 2000s where like everything was new.
Yeah.
Social media was new and all these cool things that were plugging into Twitter and Facebook and all those cool connections we all made back um were possible because of the experimentation and the increasing usability of the tools to build the web. And they were really still very difficult to use at that point, but it enabled more people to figure it out. Now we're getting to a place where, oh man, like almost anybody will be able to stand up something that meets their vision. Will it be artistically beautiful and include all of the things that it needs to? Probably not. And we're gonna have kind of a stumbling period before we learn to truly take advantage of these tools. But I do think that there's a lot to be excited about there. And I think the more that we kind of use it and shape it a bit, we can help drive towards a future that isn't just like some kind of garbage output where everything is the same and it's all milk. It's just boring. Um, but yeah, I think there's some exciting stuff on the horizon. There is already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way I like to approach it too, is just with awe and excitement to see what's next. I think that you could be fearful, but I think the positive approach is much more constructive. I will say though, just the other day I was asking Grok to go ahead and compare like all my recent credit card statements and help me analyze where I was spending money.
Yep.
And normally I'd expect some sort of text response. It was like, boom, boom, boom. Hey, I just built you a web app so you can
Yeah.
click around and I was like, did you just build me mint.com back from the 2000s? Like
Yeah.
in a second? This
That's
is
it,
wild.
right? Like, it is wild, and we've used it for, like, really deep research type things, like, and I think the biggest risk here is that the low-hanging fruit of creating action figure illustrations of ourselves and, writing some text for blog posts is really where this shines. It's not. I mean, that's so basic. And I mean, it may have its uses, but I think, the possibility of getting, a GPT to deeply analyze a topic and help you form a point of view on it and begin to build out your thinking around it by having something that is that smart to bounce things off of quickly. You get into that bit of that flow state and, kind of go deeper and deeper and build your understanding of it. Of course, you need to double check these things. You need to fact check it. You need to understand where it's coming from. But it's also, we did some research a couple of weeks ago that the query, coming up with the query and thinking about the prompt, the initial sort of where we want to go with it was a few hours of back and forth and kind of understanding, and then, getting ChatGPT into its deep research mode and it comes back 25 minutes later with a 12-page report that compares and contrasts these two sort of exit potentials for
Yeah.
businesses. And yeah, you could do that yourself in about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm not even talking about sitting down and writing the report, which, by the way, was pretty great, um, in terms of quality. I'm just talking about being able to kind of know what levers to pull to
Yeah.
do that research and find those examples and compare them and build some spreadsheets or whatever you need to do in order to understand it. You know, it's able to do that far faster. And if you can think in a way that is going to enable you to leverage these tools in a way that will allow you to outpace your competitors or just to find your own path for what works for you. I think there's a great deal of opportunity there. And if you'd asked me the same question a year ago and I told you that I was talking about AI now, I probably would have been like, "What? He's saying what?" Because it was just I was so skeptical of the quality.
Oh, yeah, and that everyone called everything AI, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, it was terrible. But now, we're in some pretty interesting places with this stuff. So, you have to burn down a Amazon rainforest every time you make a query, but, like,
Right?
maybe the marketing is worth it.
Breaking news, you heard it here. Hey, I'm not really, the next question is like, who are you? Who are you? Can you take me back in time, little you days? Did you know you're gonna be, like, designing and thinking and really teaching and educating, you know, the listeners here, myself, your students, your team? What was it like?
Hmm, man, I don't know how far back to go, but
Go far back. Little Jeff.
yeah, he was riding bicycles. But,
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to be a designer at about 15 or 16. One of my first summer jobs was with, I can actually see the building from my office where I'm standing right now. Um, was at a small graphic design firm in 1986. No, sorry, 1989. And so I was 16 years old and I got to work there for 2 months in the summer and kind of see what they did and how they worked. And I was like, all right. And I was like coming out of grade 10 or going into grade 10 or something like that. I was like, this is what I want. And so when I um, was coming to the end of high school, there's a world renowned design school here in Halifax called NSCAD University, Nova Scotia College of Art and Design back then. And I only applied there. My parents were like, "Are you sure you don't wanna, like, hedge your bets?"
Spread the chances out a little bit,
'Cause it
yeah.
was really hard to get into back then. They were, like, really selective, and, you know, you would have a class of I think it was, um, like 100 per year or 100 per semester would get in kind of thing. It was not much, and then you had to do this foundation year, and then you could move into what you wanted to truly study. So, I actually took I loved it so much, I took an extra year just so I could do other courses. I
Yes.
minored in photography, and I did a lot of art histories, and, I did some, printmaking and things like that, like, just to experience some of the other parts of the school because it's also a fine art institution as well, and, so I took 5 years to do it, and when I came out, I went to work for a big industrial firm, actually, here in Eastern Canada, the Irving family, and, spent I was there for 3 years and spent most of it developing, educational resources to get elementary school kids interested in careers in forestry, which like is a big thing in New Brunswick where I was living at the time. And so we had seconded teachers and all these other educators to work with, and we're building these, you know, in 1996, we were building like full motion video on websites and stuff. Like we had like 56K modems,
Yeah.
and not even in some cases. And, so got to build a lot of really interesting stuff and really kind of expand my skill set quite rapidly because the tools were just coming out. And yeah, so and eventually left there and went and stood up a web practice within a traditional advertising agency here in Halifax, where I'm based now, and stayed there for a number of years, and left at one point to rejoin my old boss from the big industrial firm again to try and revolutionize and digitize the manual and educational system for shipbuilding for
Huh.
the Navy, and went to work for a firm for that. Didn't really work out. They laid off the entire department.
Oh, no.
It was 7 days after my first daughter was born. I went back to work, and they're like, "Yeah, we're letting everybody go."
Oh,
And I
geez.
was like, "Oh no." So, like, I can still remember it clear as day, like, leaving there and calling my wife, and she's, like, a week postpartum, and I'm like, "I'm coming home." She's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, you see, I just got laid off," and, she's, obviously very concerned. I was like, "No, no, it's gonna be cool. Don't worry about it. I'm finally gonna, like, do my own thing."
Yeah, we got this.
I'd been talking about this for quite a while before that, just never had the impetus to do it. It was too easy to stay in a job. And so I got very lucky. I called a few of the freelance clients that I had while I was in school, and kind of worked with a little bit here and there over the years. And this just happened to be one of them. Was they were in the midst of firing their agency, and I was like, "Cool, can we meet?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so I basically had that client within an hour of getting laid off. I incorporated the company within a month, stood it up.
That is fast.
Yeah, and just started working, and it was, oh my god, it was stressful as hell. Like, it was really, it was difficult. I went to design
Yeah.
school. I'm not a business major, like, there was a lot to learn. I made a lot of mistakes and recovered from most of them, apparently. So I'm still here 21 years later, but, and that was largely a branding and web design firm, because those are my skill sets. But I met my current business partner actually in the early days of Twitter, and he was a VP of marketing with a concentration in social media at one of the large local agencies. And so we did a few projects together. I was kind of bringing to life the digital vision that he had for clients that their agency had. And eventually we realized that someone in the middle was making money and it wasn't us. And
Right.
so he left, and we rebranded my firm, and we joined together as 50/50 partners. And we've been working together for 16 years now. So evolved a ton in that time, kind of did the HubSpot agency thing for 4 or 5 years, and then went all in on manufacturing back in 2017, and have kind of been focused on that vertical ever since.
What is it about manufacturing?
I mean, if you'd asked me at the time, it was that we had a couple of great clients in this,
Yeah, right.
and we were able to we understood them and felt we liked the complexity of it, and that it offered us the ability to do one of the things about being a smallish firm is that we also have a lot of capabilities, across a wide range of different things. So you know manufacturers, especially at the size that we often service, in kind of that 50 to quarter million or quarter billion dollar range, they need everything. They might need branding, they need a new web platform, they need e-commerce, they need trade show material, they need account based marketing and Google AdWords and all this other stuff. So we're able to provide that to a nice swath of a number of clients at the right size for us, and also have a handful of billion plus entities that we also do. more like, a single thing for them. We're one of several agencies that they work with. So we have specialties in certain areas and we work with them on those. But yeah, so Kula as an agency, it's kind of been our baby for quite a number of years now, and
Yeah.
still kind of continuing to change and evolve. And that's certainly a big part of my life.
And, just any manufacturing or the particular sweet spots, like, who should reach out? Like, or if someone bumps into someone else?
Um, we play a lot in the automation space.
Yeah.
So we work with some small and large industrial automation companies. We have a bit of a unique concentration in packaging. Um, so we work with probably 4 or 5 firms in various aspects of packaging, mostly in the plastics space. Um, so yeah, so machinery companies, um, automation, packaging, those are certainly verticals we know very well. But
Okay.
really, anything that has a really complex sales cycle and a lot of channels, um, and kind of that long, you know, very atypical sales cycle where there or engineers are getting involved and there's quoting and all of that kind of thing. Custom
Yeah.
design solutions. We really get that world in a way that a lot of typical agencies might not. Uh, and then we can build really cool web platforms around that based on the expertise that we've built within the firm.
That's powerful. Well, uh, got a question for you. It's a bit of a hypothetical question.
All right.
Are you ready for this? Because you see, I may have a time machine. I may or may not have a time machine down here in New Hampshire. So you come visit, it's in the backyard covered in a tarp. Right. So we get some lobster, get some beer, and we use a time. It's a special kind of time machine. You get to go back in time and visit yourself 4 days after graduating from school, right?
Yep.
And that extra year and all the extra classes. And you get to go talk to that Jeff. What do you say? What kind of things do you tell yourself?
I think the thing that I could most have learned and benefited from, I wouldn't have listened. But I think the thing that I wish I knew then, that I wish I could tell myself then, is that relax, it's all going to work out. Like you have the tools to figure out how to fix things when they go wrong. Just chill out. I think I was a lot more hot headed back then, you know, and
Yeah.
I think a little bit of wisdom of time has helped me out a fair bit in terms of just being able to recognize that this too shall pass and dealing with conflict, whatever it happens to be.
You said you wouldn't listen.
Probably not. Probably think I know better. Man, I've got a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 21-year-old. They
Yeah.
know everything. And I don't have anything to offer to them, but I know that they will look back and remember some of those discussions we've had because it's like I remember thinking that exact same way, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Well, if people do want to reach out to you, where do you want them to go?
I think probably our website's probably the easiest way. Kulapartners.com, KULA partners.com.
Awesome. Awesome.
Indeed. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Casey. It's been fun.
Absolutely, man. And for those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, I got pages of notes over here, front and back, then share this with someone else. Be a thought leader. Who needs to hear about it? Maybe we should check. Even one action. We'll make sure we link to it from the show notes. Check your site out. I did. I got a couple things I got to fix on my site to make sure it it everyone can read it, right? Everyone can access that information. So yeah, that would be the takeaway. That and definitely connect with Jeff and get his help if you want to get your site redesigned and redesigned in the right way. With that, Jeff, thank you again, sir.
Thanks, Casey.
All right, everyone. This has been a crazy cool, very, very disruptive episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.